The One Who Inspires. As we take refuge in the Three Jewels, we hear, contemplate, and practice the Buddhist teachings, making efforts in generating and developing both renunciation and bodhicitta, and trying to understand the view of emptiness. The path appears to unfold smoothly, but one issue always stands before us. How do we navigate our relationship with our spiritual teachers? It seems impossible for us to find a path to liberation without the guidance of an authentic teacher. The fact that we remain deluded in this painful cyclic existence serves as evidence. Searching alone, we are like blind men in the middle of a deserted plain. The wisdom of the Buddha is a beacon that allows us to see in the long dark nights of our quest for liberation. When the Buddha achieved complete enlightenment in India's Bodh Gaya some 2,500 years ago, we were wandering somewhere else in samsara and missed the chance to follow him. And we have missed the chance of liberation again and again since then, due to our arrogance, bias, obstinacy, clinging, and cowardice. Are waiting for endless nights to lighten our path with Buddhist wisdom. If we miss them again, they say they will wait until the day when we finally meet them. Such is the compassion of a spiritual teacher. A spiritual teacher is called a lama in Tibetan, a term similar to guru in Sanskrit. When we start to turn our minds inward instead of looking outward, we are ready to meet our spiritual teachers. We can certainly read, contemplate, or practice according to written instructions on our own. But we have long been used to interpreting words subjectively, and our thinking is constrained by self-centeredness. Without the aid of our teachers, we will not be able to achieve direct experience and complete realization of the innate nature of the mind. Spiritual teachers provoke thinking and transmit suitable methods of practice. Thus, they are essential on our spiritual path. If a teacher is the one who is spiritually accomplished, they can assist the student in progressing not only properly, but also quickly and directly to bring about realization. Shakyamuni Buddha once said that no Buddha of the past attained Buddhahood without the guidance of authentic teachers. And it is with the help of their teachers that all the 1,000 Buddhas in the fortunate eon to which we belong have achieved or will achieve complete enlightenment. If we had the same insight as that of a Buddha, we would understand the central significance of having a spiritual teacher. The 14th century Tibetan Buddhist text, The Wish-Fulfilling Treasure, composed by the omniscient Longchenpa, says that it is through the blessings of a qualified master that a practitioner develops the merit and wisdom necessary for attaining enlightenment. Longchenpa, who is the abbot of Samye Monastery, Tibet's first Buddhist monastery, was one of the most brilliant masters of the Nyingma school, and is regarded as an earthly manifestation of Manjushri, the bodhisattva of wisdom. An authentic and qualified spiritual teacher is a necessity for Buddhist practitioners, since aspirations alone are not sufficient to transcend birth and death on the path to spiritual realization. To liberate ourselves from samsara, we need to learn from teachers what to do and what to avoid in accordance with the karmic law of cause and effect, as well as how to watch our minds and actions carefully. Spiritual teachers are also the field of merit for us to accumulate merit and wisdom quickly and effectively. Their blessings are the most powerful means to save beings from the pain of samsara. Relying on them is the quickest way to help us deepen faith, compassion, and wisdom. On the path to enlightenment, nothing else is better than a spiritual teacher acting as our guiding light. Undoubtedly, we earnestly hope to learn Dharma and attain liberation. Otherwise, we would neither have chosen this path, which is particularly difficult to traverse in an age filled with temptations and doubts, nor would we willingly follow our spiritual teachers. Yet we often underestimate the tricky and stubborn side of our ego and its ability to resort to every possible means of self-defense. This ego might materialize at any time to mar our connections with our teachers. Why is our selfish ego so threatened by authentic spiritual teachers? Let us first look at what a student will do in the Tibetan tradition when he meets a teacher. Normally, he will make an offering as well as bow to the teacher. This is not merely an act of politeness and respect, but carries a much deeper meaning. Offerings include practice, service, and material objects. Among the three, the most valuable is the offering of practice, consisting of putting whatever the teacher teaches into practice with determination and diligence. His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche often stressed that it is largely through Dharma practice that one makes a positive connection with him, and the offering of practice pleases him the most. This is because it is through the practice of Buddha Dharma that we eradicate our attachment to ego, to a self. Authentic teachers are not interested in material things, but material things are often objects of fixation in this world. If a student gives food, goods, or money to his teacher, objects of his attachment, it signifies their willingness to let go of clinging and to follow the teacher. Not only do material offerings help subdue attachment to a self, but they are also a convenient means to accumulate wisdom and merit. Any kind of material offering to a teacher can be good. The kind or amount given is not of central significance. The truth is that the merit of offering hinges on motivation. If you are motivated by ostentation, you will not necessarily gain much merit, even if your offering is abundant. On the other hand, as His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche once said, while the amount that a student offers is not essential, it can still be a good reference point to gauge his devotion to the teacher. Without faith, one would not be inclined to make any material offerings to the teacher and the three jewels. But with faith, devotion, and pure motivation, one can accumulate great merit through making offerings, regardless of the amount that is offered. During the time of the Buddha, there was an old homeless woman who often saw the king, prince, and other people making offerings to the Buddha and his disciples. She, too, hoped to make an offering as they did. One day she received a copper coin after having begged for the entire day. She wanted to buy some offering oil with the coin, but found that she could not afford to buy the oil for even a single oil lamp. Out of mercy, the oil vendor gave her some oil for free. Joyfully, she went to a temple and made a light offering. While doing so, she also made a wish. I have nothing other than lighting this lamp to offer, but by the merit of this offering, I hope to attain wisdom one day. When that day comes, may I have the ability to help all sentient beings to dispel the darkness in their minds and guide them to attain enlightenment. That night, all but one lamp went out. The lamp that remained burning till daybreak was the one offered by the old homeless woman. Not only was the oil in the lamp not reduced, but the wick also stayed new. Maudgalyayana, who possessed the greatest supernatural powers among all the Buddha's disciples, came to take care of the offering lamps at daybreak. He wanted to extinguish the lamp so that he could light it again when the Buddha gave teachings at night. But however hard he tried, he could not extinguish it. Hearing this, the Buddha came to Maudgalyayana and said, "You will never be able to extinguish the light of this lamp. Even if you poured over it all the water from the world's oceans, rivers, and lakes, it would continue burning simply because it was offered with a pure intent, the aspiration for the ultimate liberation of all beings." At that moment, the old woman arrived, and the Buddha prophesied that she would one day attain supreme Buddhahood under a name meaning the Lamp Buddha. Evidently, with pure motivation, even the smallest offering can accumulate extraordinary merit. According to some Buddhist sutras and commentarial texts, any delightful scene we see, such as a babbling stream or wild flowers, can be offered through visualization as a feast to the eyes of our spiritual teachers. Doing so also brings us inconceivable merit. The offering of service is essentially to do whatever our spiritual teachers require us to do. Since an authentic teacher's every action is for the benefit of all sentient beings, and in accordance with the Buddhist teachings, our assistance to that teacher indirectly benefits all beings and protects the Dharma. Moreover, our rejoicing in teachers' activities and accomplishments acts like tiny drops joining a vast ocean, allowing us to share the ocean-like merit of the teachers. So whatever we do for our teachers generates both wisdom and merit, which are essential to the realization of emptiness as well as to the attainment of complete enlightenment. Whenever I got an opportunity to serve my root Lama, His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, I was always happy. After His Holiness passed away, one day at daybreak, I dreamed that I was on retreat. To my surprise, His Holiness, whom I missed dearly, came to the front of the cave where I was staying. I was ecstatic and went out to greet him. Smiling, His Holiness sat down on a Tibetan-style rug. Afraid that the rock behind him might hurt his head and back, I went inside to fetch a woolen blanket to use as a cushion. I was both happy and nervous, and I tried and tried, but could not fold the blanket into a proper shape. I kept trying until I woke up, and the tremendous joy of seeing and serving His Holiness lingered. Offerings can also be categorized by the three kinds of offerings of body, speech, and mind. A student's Dharma practice is the offering of practice through body, speech, and mind. Their offering of service is through body and speech, and their rejoicing in their teacher's acts is through their mind. Whichever way we offer, It helps deepen our faith and loosen our grasp on the self. The Tibetan-style prostration, where one's limbs and head completely touch the ground, demands deep humility, which includes the shedding of pride and the acceptance of any situation. Through prostration, one accumulates tremendous merit and wisdom. The sutras say that on top of the Buddha's head was a crown made of flesh that was round and circled clockwise. This is one of the 32 major marks of the Buddha, and is the result of the devotion and homage he paid to his spiritual teachers. So by making offerings and performing prostrations to a spiritual teacher, one becomes ready to let go of one's ego, mentally preparing to be a student of that teacher. It is for this reason that our ego resists teachers. In front of them, it has no foothold. Let us turn now to ourselves. What kind of attitude do we usually have when meeting a teacher? First, we might initially have a stereotypical image of a teacher in mind before actually meeting them. We might expect them to look sagely, fine, noble, dignified, and gracious. We might expect them to be able to fulfill our needs and wishes, giving us solace and help whenever needed. We might even expect them to display supernatural abilities from time to time, so that we will not become bored or lose patience on the path. Then, when we go to see the teacher, if they fail to meet our preconceived ideas and expectations, we may be disappointed and begin to doubt whether they possess authentic wisdom and merit. After meeting, not everyone will be immediately sure that they should form a bond with the teacher. It is necessary to examine the teacher carefully before becoming committed to them through receiving empowerments and teachings. A spiritual teacher is our paramount source of refuge in cyclic existence. We are going to place our trust in the teacher for all our future lives. It is they who will teach us what to do and what to avoid on the spiritual path. Without careful examination, we might end up with an unqualified teacher and fall further into the cycle of samsaric suffering. To examine teachers carefully is of particular importance on the tantric path, because once established, the formal relationship between a teacher and a student cannot be destroyed. Otherwise, the tantric vow will be transgressed or even broken, and the related causal effects will be extremely deleterious. Patrul Rinpoche's Words of My Perfect Teacher elucidates clearly how to discern an authentic teacher. Although in the degenerate age we can rarely find a spiritual teacher who possesses all the qualities described in the sutras and tantras, a qualified teacher should at least meet the following criteria. They have true bodhicitta. They have learned and mastered various teachings and practices in order to transmit complete sets of realization methods suitable for students. And they are pure observers of received vows and precepts, including the commitments of tantric practice, which are called samayas in Sanskrit. When it comes to examining a Vajra teacher, the teacher's keeping of samayas is paramount. Vajra is not a title like Khenpo, Tulku, or Rinpoche. It indicates a solemn and specific commitment between a tantric teacher and a student. When a tantric teacher bestows a tantric empowerment, gives a tantric teaching, and transmits a pith instruction to you, this teacher has formed a special bond with you and becomes your Vajra teacher. If the teacher transgresses the tantric vow, they have broken the tantric lineage of the Dharma and are therefore no longer qualified to confer on you any empowerment and teaching. Some people are fastidious about everyday trivialities like what to eat and how to dress. But when it comes to choosing a spiritual teacher, they are sometimes careless, as if anyone could be their spiritual teacher. The kinds of teachers one meets depend on one's attitude and karmic connection with the teachers. This is also dependent on collective karma in the era to which they belong. Shakyamuni manifested as the Buddha at this time. Following his nirvana, beings, due to their dwindling fortunes, could only see Buddhas manifest as arhats and then panditas, which is a Sanskrit word meaning learned masters. Now that we are in the degenerate age, our minds and eyes only let us see ordinary people, so Buddhas manifest as commoners in this world to benefit us. For each individual, meeting a kind and wise teacher in this lifetime requires merit gathered over many lifetimes. And if one's attitude and motivation are not pure, they will be blind to the qualities of a spiritual teacher, even if the teacher is a real Buddha. In this respect, to examine a teacher is essentially about examining our own minds. That is, what kind of intent we have when we seek out a teacher. Do we aim for spiritual liberation or for something else? And if we strive for spiritual liberation, do we aim for our individual liberation from cyclic existence or for the liberation of all sentient beings? Do we aim for the knowledge and realization of the absolute truth of universal phenomena, or do we only intend to experience certain meditative states or acquire new identities? If you have a pure attitude, you will recognize a Buddha's embodiment even if they appear as an ordinary person in front of you. If you do not have the right mental attitude, no matter how qualified a spiritual teacher is, you remain blind to their virtues. Devadatta and Sunakshatra were the Buddha's cousins, who had been following the Buddha for several decades. However, both of them thought that they were more spiritually accomplished than the Buddha. The actual manifestation of Buddhas in this world is subject to the collective karma of beings, whereas your own ability to identify your teacher as a real Buddha depends entirely on your own merit and wisdom. With regard to how one should examine a spiritual teacher, the words of my perfect teacher offers this special counsel. In the first place, you should take care to check the teacher. Before becoming committed to him through empowerments and teachings, you should examine him with care. Should you find that he has all the characteristics of a teacher, follow him. If some of them are lacking, do not follow him. But from the moment you start to follow him, learn to have faith in him and see him with pure perception, thinking only of his virtues and seeing whatever he does as positive. Looking for flaws in him will only bring you inconceivable ills. In addition, it is paramount that your mind be closely connected with the mind of your teachers. Following a spiritual teacher is called Lama La Tenpa in Tibetan. Tenpa means to follow, to unconditionally rely on, and to firmly believe that by doing so, liberation will be attained. Each of us has different connections with our teachers. Some, when simply hearing the name of the teacher or meeting them for the first time, will feel a strong physical and emotional reaction. For instance, merely hearing the name of the translator Marpa was enough to arouse in Milarepa an extraordinary faith from the very depth of his being, even though he had never seen Mapa before. Others develop trust and faith over time through regular contact and learning. Some have the chance to stay at the side of their teachers over a long period, as in the case of Lama Ursul, who had followed Mipham Rinpoche and been his attendant for 37 years until Mipham Rinpoche's passing. Others have to leave their teachers shortly after having received teachings from them. Atisha had more than 100 teachers. Sudhana, a youth from ancient India, learned from many spiritual teachers through a lengthy pilgrimage to various places. In a nutshell, to follow a teacher does not depend on whether one is physically near to or far from the teacher. If one is mentally connected with the teacher, grasps their teachings, integrates the teachings with their own mind, and has heartfelt gratitude for the teacher's virtues and kindness, they are able to obtain never-ending blessings of the teacher. This constitutes the very essence of following a spiritual teacher, relying on them to reach liberation. There is a difference between keeping one's distance from a teacher prior to close examination of them and becoming disappointed with a teacher due to preconceived ideas about what a teacher should be like. You should consider whether you examine the teacher without bias, or whether you merely feel that the teacher differs from what you fondly hoped for or imagined. Once in a while, a teacher will deliberately surprise you or even disappoint you in order to challenge your mental openness. If you hope to see an awe-inspiring teacher, they may show you their ill-mannered side. If you think a teacher should be gentle and soft-spoken, they may appear stern and critical. If you believe a teacher should look like an immortal sage, they may burp, pick their teeth, fall ill, and grow old just like anybody else. When Milarepa, who desired to attain Buddhahood in one lifetime, met his future teacher Mapa for the first time, Mapa was ploughing the field, looking like a common farmer. When the well-known Pandita Naropa met Tilopa, a homeless person whom the locals thought was mad, but who was a great Mahasiddha in disguise, Tilopa was eating fish in a shack. When Sadaprarudita finally met Damodgata after overcoming many hardships, Damodgata was enjoying pleasures in a palace. Examples like these are too numerous to count. It seems that all teachers deploy the same tactics. They challenge your preconceptions right from the start so that you feel lost and perplexed, wondering how deluded and ridiculous your biased thinking is, especially toward the one whom you seek out to be your spiritual teacher. My late uncle, Lorong Tanpa, loved to tell a story from his childhood. When his father, my maternal grandmother, passed away, the family invited the famous Tulku Sonam Gyatso home to perform transference rituals for him. Surprisingly, Tulku went straight to sleep after having a good meal upon arrival. This made my uncle worried. Tulku did not wake up till the next day at noon. Then he smiled and said, "I'd better hurry to recite some texts. Otherwise this boy will think I do nothing other than eat his food." Hearing this, my uncle was both astounded and ashamed, and an overwhelming sense of faith in Tulku dawned on him. If whatever the teacher has done has not scared you away, it might be the first time that you have managed to resist your ego's cajolery, not being enticed away by it. Unhappy with the failure, your proud and cunning ego will refuse to submit and start playing new tricks. "Well done," it will flatter you. "You must have such good fortune to be a student of this important person. How wise you are indeed. much wiser than those common people and nobler than any Buddhists of other traditions. You are one of a kind, supremely capable. You are such a fit vessel for Buddhist learning. Such sweet talk pleases you and makes you feel inflated, unaware that this is just the ego's usual tricks. At your ego's instigation, you are busy playing your new role. In front of non-Buddhists, you act as a Buddhist. In front of Buddhists, you act as an accomplished Buddhist. And in front of your teacher, you act as a devoted and obedient disciple. Sometimes you play the role consciously, but most of the time you play it subconsciously. In other words, you perceive yourself as a Buddhist, but in reality you are only playing. You change your diet, lapse into Buddhist jargon, and live a different routine. You perform regular incense offerings, prostrations, and animal life release, spending money and efforts on religious activities and charity. What truly matters, though, is your motivation. What really inspires your action to prove to others you have a Buddhist identity, or to make yourself feel good as you are on a path well acknowledged by others, or to explore the true nature of your mind. The 84,000 methods of Dharma taught by the Buddha all lead to liberation. No matter which method you practice, you must take it to heart and really apply it in order to transform your deluded mind. If your practice is only a cosmetic measure, you will never succeed in real terms. You hear your ego saying, "The teacher is crucial to one's liberation. You must make a good impression." So you work hard in order to demonstrate your best side to your teacher, vying for their attention and favour. In sutras and tantras, there are detailed instructions regarding how students should behave, such as being gentle, unassuming, and respectful instead of being rude, pompous, and ostentatious. These good manners usually require deliberate imitations before they become cultivated personal qualities. Therefore, provided one is respectful and devoted, it is acceptable if they are somewhat contrived in front of the teacher. I have a student who always behaves with extreme reverence and awe. His manner appears so dramatic that it often makes others laugh. Although as his teacher I myself do not have such virtue and merit, his sincerity and devotion gain him vast merit. So I often rejoice in his acts. If such behaviour, however, is meant to show that you are more polite, graceful, educated, and open-minded than other students in order to be treated favourably by your teacher, it will be hard for you to connect your mind with your teacher's mind. The story of Kongpo Ben, in the words of my perfect teacher, may be enlightening. Once, in the province of Kongpo, there lived a simple-minded man named Ben. He made a journey to Lhasa to see Jowo Rinpoche, the famous statue of the Buddha at the Jokhang Temple. When he arrived in front of the statue, there was no caretaker or anyone else nearby. He was tired and hungry. Seeing Torma, Tibetan offering cakes, and the butter lamps in front of it, he imagined that Jowo Rinpoche must dip pieces of the offering cakes in the melted butter of the lamps and eat them. The wicks were burning in the lamps, he supposed, to keep the butter liquid. "I think I'd better eat some, like Jowo Rinpoche does," he thought to himself, and dunking a piece of dough from the torma into the butter, he ate it. Then he looked at the smiling face of the Jowo. "What a nice Lama you are," he said. "Even when dogs come and steal the food you've been offered, you smile. When the draught makes your lamps sputter, you still keep smiling. Here, I'll leave you my boots. Please look after them for me while I walk around you." He took off his boots and put them up in front of the statue. While he was walking around the pathway that circles the temple, the caretaker returned and saw the boots. He was about to throw them out when the statue started to speak. "Don't throw those boots away. Kongpo Ben has entrusted them to me." Ben eventually came back and took his boots. "You really are what they call a good lama," he said to the statue. "Next year, why don't you come and visit us? I'll cook you a nice meal and brew up some nice old barley beer." The Jowo replied, "I'll come." After his return, Ben told his wife, "I've invited Jowo Rinpoche. I am not sure exactly when he's coming, though, so don't forget to keep an eye out for him." A year went by. One day, as Ben's wife was drawing water from a river, a clear reflection of Jowo Rinpoche appeared in the water. She ran home and told her husband, "There's something down in the river. I wonder if it's the person you invited." Ben rushed down to the river and saw Jowo Rinpoche shining in the water. Thinking that he must have fallen into the river, Ben jumped in after him. As he grabbed at the image, he found that he could actually hold it and bring it along with him. For Ben, the statue of the Jowo Buddha looked like the real Buddha himself. He did not think that Jowo Rinpoche was an ancient Indian who once lived some 1,000 kilometers away, but a lama who was present and with whom he could talk. This lama was not a god or fairy who flew around in the sky and lived without the need to eat. Neither was the torma only for display in front of the statue. This lama could encounter rain and wind, and could accidentally fall into the water and need to be rescued. Ben must have wholeheartedly revered and admired Jowo Rinpoche. The reason he revered and admired him was not because Jowo Rinpoche had fame and possessed miraculous power, but because he was a good lama who always smiled even when dogs stole his torma and a draught sputtered the offering butter lamps. In Ben's mind, there was no room for presumptions. He did not try to act as a devotee, supposing what he was meant to do and avoid doing in front of a lama. He knew none of these things. All he did was enter into the presence of his lama, hoping to get close to him. Each of us reacts differently when in the presence of our teachers. Some of us may be relaxed, others reserved. Some may be courtly, others abrupt. In times past, whenever my spiritual brothers and I went to see His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, we would pace at the doorway for a long time, feeling extremely awkward. As none of us dared to enter the room first, we often had to use dice to decide who should be the first to enter. But however you may feel, being connected with your teacher will become easier if you remain open and honest. His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche often spoke of his early years of Buddhist study under Thubga Rinpoche, whom he greatly revered. Although he was eager to be in the presence of Thubga Rinpoche, he would never dare to approach him without being called over. He often gazed at his lama's small house from a distance, hoping to catch sight of him. If Thubga Rinpoche inadvertently spotted him and called him over, he would be elated. Another story, often told by His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, was about his first meeting with Pema Siddhi Rinpoche, who was regarded as the true embodiment of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. Prior to meeting Pema Siddhi Rinpoche, His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche assumed that Rinpoche would be finely dressed and have a regal look. However, what he saw was an old man no different from a commoner. He thought something was wrong with his eyes, so he rubbed them and looked again. But the Lama was still the same simple, gentle old man. His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche said to himself, "It must be my karmic obscurations that hinder me from seeing the real manifestation of Avalokiteshvara." He closed his eyes, repenting and praying fervently, while his confidence in Rinpoche's being Avalokiteshvara never faltered for even a second. His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche's pure perception pleased Rinpoche greatly. Praising him, Pema Siddhi Rinpoche said to his disciples, "Today a great bodhisattva under Thugpa Rinpoche has joined our gathering. His coming will multiply the merit of our mantra recitations. How fortunate we are to have him. I always ask you to count your recitations strictly, but today is a rare occasion. Let us add some extra recitations." As soon as he said this, he started to move forward several prayer beads in his rosary string. One bead in the string may represent 100 or 1,000 mantra recitations. His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche often used this story to teach his students. We may not be able to see our lamas being the embodiments of Buddhas or Bodhisattvas due to our insufficient merit and limited conditions. As long as we do not follow our deluded thoughts but genuinely repent our karmic obscurations, our lamas will be delighted and their compassionate blessings will pour into our minds. As the saying goes, 1,000 rivers have 1,000 reflections of the moon. While the moon in the sky is the very same moon, its reflection in different rivers will vary. The brilliance and clarity of the moon's reflection depends on the state of the river. The mind of a teacher is like the brilliant moon in the sky, and the mental quality of a student is like a river. The stiller and purer the student's mind is, the brighter and clearer the moon's reflection in it will become. The murkier and the more turbulent the mind is, the more fragmented and obscured the moon's reflection will be. Meanwhile, as long as there is water in the river, there will always be a reflection of the moon, regardless of whether the water is clear or murky. Therefore, you should not think that you are the only one who is connected with your teacher. Neither should you be troubled by the fact that others have a close connection with your teacher. This will not diminish the power of your connection. Sometimes we might become annoyed by fellow students' relationship with our teacher, and even try to prevent our teacher from reaching out to these students. This self-centeredness often constitutes an obstacle to our spiritual progress, since what we perceive as faith is, in effect, attachment. It hinders not only our relationship with fellow students, but also our relationship with our teacher. Slowly, we find it harder and harder to reach the mind of the teacher. Vast, open, and clear faith repels neither spiritual friends nor any other qualified teachers. If you can keep the promise to never abandon your present teacher, you can always go meet and follow other teachers who have a connection with you. A student does not have to follow just one teacher. A spiritual teacher is not the property of an individual student, nor is a student the property of an individual teacher. Some practitioners whose faith is clear and pure may follow many teachers because of their connections with them and the necessity to engage in different practices. Doing so does not undermine the student's faith in any of their teachers or create conflict. Whether it is better for you to follow one or several teachers depends on the strength of your faith. If you desert your previous teacher after meeting a new one, you have effectively deserted all teachers and will lose all of their blessings. 3 practitioners once came to Khyentse Yertche Dorje for a particular tantric initiation. Khyentse Yertche Dorje is regarded as the mind emanation of Jingpe Lingpa. He told them that they could receive the initiation only if they agreed to abandon their existing teacher. Since it was a very special initiation, 2 practitioners finally agreed to this request. The one who refused was called Wara. He said, "My teacher does not have any fault. I will not even pretend to abandon him by paying you lip service." He was then expelled from the initiation gathering. However, when the dejected Wara was on his way back, Khyentse Yertche Dorje sent someone to fetch him. The great master extolled him in public. "We should all be like Wara and follow our lamas." Then Khyentse Yertche Dorje had the other 2 practitioners expelled from the monastery. Subsequently, Wara stayed for many years at the side of Khyentse Yertche Dorje, who deemed him an accomplished being no different from me. In the eyes of devoted students like us, nothing is more righteous than pleasing our teachers. We do whatever we can to honor our teachers. This intent is undoubtedly pure. However, sometimes our wish to honor our teachers can become an excuse for being stubborn, narrow, and intolerant to other fellow students, especially if we believe that what we do is absolutely right. Actually, it is vital to maintain respect and harmony among spiritual friends in general and Vajra spiritual friends in particular. Vajra spiritual friends are our companions on the path to Buddhahood. Conflicts among them are upsetting to teachers, casting obstacles to their Dharma transmissions and their lifespans. If we look into it, the root of our problem is still our attachment to a self, which can make a fool of us at any time and turn our best intentions into obstacles. Of the 14 root tantric vows defined in the Kalachakra Tantra, 3 concern Vajra teachers. Do not disturb the minds of our Vajra teachers. Do not transgress teachers' injunctions. And do not fault Vajra brothers and sisters because of anger. The 3rd one in particular is often neglected. Although it is well understood that a Vajra teacher is a critical karmic object of one's actions, few are aware that tensions and conflicts among Vajra students will harm their Vajra teachers. In this context, Vajra spiritual friends are critical karmic objects as well. When we have the chance to work with our Vajra spiritual friends in assisting our teachers and spreading Buddhism, we should cherish this opportunity and rejoice in others' good intentions and deeds. If we have different thoughts, we should resort to friendly communication. Sometimes, in order to help others fulfill their kind wishes, We do not have to insist on our ways of doing things or doing what we regard as right or positive. Neither do we have to insist on perfection, as it is already perfect if all of us, through doing things together, can subdue individual afflictions and enhance joy and confidence. His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche advised his students not to disturb other people's minds. The omniscient Longchenpa advised practitioners that the best offering to spiritual teachers is to follow what they say. We who are stubborn and unwise with regard to cause and effect should always remember these pieces of advice, just as it is said in the common ending of sutras that all who heard what the Buddha had said sincerely rejoiced, believing, accepting, honoring, and practicing it. According to the Longchen Naingthig, a terma cycle revealed by Jigme Lingpa in the 18th century that provides a comprehensive explanation of the Great Perfection, one's mind will merge completely with the teacher's mind, and the two will become one. This is possible if the student regards the teacher as a real Buddha and prays to him with complete faith and fervent devotion, provided the teacher in question is a realized being whose lineage is unstained. By the power of his blessings alone, realization will take place. When His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche was 15 years old, he prayed to Mipham Rinpoche fervently with peerless confidence in the Great Perfection. Each time he recited 100 times the prayer to Mipham Rinpoche. He would go through Mipham Rinpoche's pith instruction on the Great Perfection, directly pointing to the nature of the mind. After 1,000,000 recitations of the prayer, and 10,000 sessions of careful study and contemplation of directly pointing to the nature of the mind, His Holiness attained realization of the Great Perfection. That being said, you are wrong if you think that you do not have to worry anymore, provided you let your teacher decide everything for you. Perhaps you simply do not want to be responsible for yourself. During our endless lives in cyclical existence, we have seen a lot and suffered a lot. Yet our memories are short-lived. Life after life, we go on living muddle-headedly, twisted and entangled in the same game without knowing it. Shakyamuni said, "I preach the way of liberation to you, but you are the master of your own liberation. If you do not make any effort but hope your teacher will deliver you to the pure land like casting a stone, your wishful thinking will surely fail you." Even if your teacher is immensely powerful, and his compassion is the most earnest, he will not be able to do so. Milarepa once asked Rongten Laga, an adept of the Great Perfection, to bestow the initiation of the Great Perfection and the related pith instruction. "The Dharma I teach," Lama Rongten Laga replied, "is the Great Perfection. If one meditates on it during the day, one can become a Buddha that same day. If one meditates on it during the night, one can become a Buddha that very night. Fortunate beings whose past actions have created suitable conditions do not even need to meditate. They will be liberated simply by hearing it. Since it is a Dharma for those of eminently superior faculties, I will teach it to you." Milarepa thought to himself, "It took me 2 weeks to obtain the main signs of success at casting spells. 7 days were enough for making hail. Now, here is a teaching even easier than spells and hail. If you meditate by day, you become a Buddha that day. If you meditate by night, you become a Buddha that night. and if your past actions have created suitable conditions, you don't even need to meditate at all. Seeing as how I met this teaching, I obviously must be one of those whose good past actions have created suitable conditions. So he stayed in bed without meditating. A few days later, seeing that he would not be the right master for Milarepa, Lama Rongchen Laga said to him, "Now I will not guide you. You should go to see Mapa, the king of translators." Nowadays, thanks to advances in transportation and communication, studying Dharma has become more convenient. We can travel to see teachers by air or by car, or learn their teachings from books, audio recordings, videos, or even online at home. In contrast, practitioners in times past had to overcome tremendous hardships to meet teachers and hear the Dharma. In the early 1950s, in order to meet his future Lama Thugma Rinpoche, the then young His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche walked more than 500 kilometers and crossed hills and mountains from his hometown, Serta, to Dzadjukha's Kyangma Ritro Monastery. Along the way, he begged for food and experienced many difficulties. At Kyangma, he studied and practiced both sutras and tantras with sheer faith and willpower, despite harsh conditions. At that time, his parents had both passed away, and no one supported him with food and clothes. He lived on meagre rations of yogurt provided by Kyangma. Small and shabby was his shack, made of earth and thatch, unable to shield the wind. As autumn and winter advanced, he had no warm clothes to fend off the cold, and he had to dig a hole in the ground inside the shack. Filling the hole with dry straw, he sat in the hole to read, as well as to keep himself warm. At night he lit a butter lamp and stayed up to study. If he was tired, he would lean against the hole and take a small break. He was greatly inspired by the story of how the omniscient Longchen Pa followed his teacher Rigdzin Kumaradza. During the most difficult time, Longchen Pa lived for 2 months with only 3 Tibetan litres of tsampa. When it snowed, he stayed in a sack made of yak hair. The sack was used as both a quilt and a mattress. Although the conditions were extremely harsh, Longchen Pa persisted in learning and received many heart teachings from Rigdzin Kumaradza. He was thus called Krungyen Yenirabjam, meaning the omniscient master who lived in a yak hair sack. Later, Longchen Pa became the lineage holder of Rigdzin Kumaradza. Anyone who sees, hears, remembers, or encounters him will attain enlightenment. The blessings of a teacher are omnipresent. In other words, all we experience in life is infused with the blessings of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. This understanding, this trust, gives us the strength to accept every encounter in life and take everything into the path. To some people, nonetheless, the blessings of a teacher mean that they do not need to be troubled with mundane concerns. They desire a way or a person to lift them out of this trivial and vulgar life and take them to a wonderland. Is it good or bad that worldly matters are no longer appealing to them? If they still hope to gain certain things, achieve certain states, or maintain a certain status, whether it is about secular fame, money, love, and desire, or about transcendental fame, gains, clairvoyance, and meditative states, it really makes no difference. The difference, if any, is that they are simply following another way of fortifying their ego. If you lose your job, you do not take it as your being unable, unlucky, or unskillful. Instead, you see it as a test, a special ordeal given by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to let you find out whether you are able to endure life's various turns. Everything that happens in your life has its meaning. If you do believe in the omnipresence of your teacher's blessings, you can accept whatever comes, even if you are at the end of your means. And your determination and openness are more than enough to make your life rich and free. Following your teacher, you will begin to study and contemplate Dharma. You will be fascinated and awestruck by the beauty and elegance of Buddhist classic texts, logical systems, views, concepts, and theories, as well as by the inspiring stories of accomplished practitioners. However, if you fail to integrate these things into your mind and gain insight and realization, they will become mere objects of knowledge. His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche often said that to learn Dharma is not for us to gather and flaunt knowledge, but to liberate us from samsara. Knowledge can lend you confidence and affirmation, or be something you can show off to others, but it cannot reliably reduce your delusion. Without having firm faith in your teacher and constantly praying for their blessings, you are susceptible to a return to old habits. Your Buddhist learning becomes only an activity of hoarding knowledge and experience. The great Indian Pandita Naropa was already highly learned and recognized when one day a wisdom Dakini told him that he was learned in words, but not in their meanings. Knowing that this was his precise problem, Naropa set out to follow the great Tilopa and learned and practiced as a beginner. His confidence in Tilopa never wavered, all the pains and hardships he suffered notwithstanding. It was while under the tutelage of Tilopa that he finally realized the uncontrived truth of all phenomena. Jnana Sutra and Vimalamitra, the early lineage masters of the Great Perfection, had similar experiences. Both of them were great Panditas for 500 lifetimes, but unable to attain complete enlightenment. With the help of Vajrasattva, a tantric deity often associated with purification practice in tantric Buddhism, who appeared in the sky to give them guidance, both went to China to follow Sri Singha, a great master in the Great Perfection lineage. After receiving the pith instructions from Sri Singha, they attained Buddhahood at last. Study, contemplation, and meditation are all essential to Buddhist practice. You hear and study the teachings, which are then validated by your direct experience and realization through meditation. Initially, meditation may look intriguing and mystical, fascinating you and filling you with enthusiasm. But when you eagerly ask your teacher for special methods, he will either smile or suggest prostration, mantra recitation, or other things similarly basic, plain, and boring. You may feel bewildered. Should we not do something different to attain Buddhahood? What is the link between the goal of enlightenment and prostration and mantra recitation? You start to doubt whether the teacher really wants to teach you something valuable. This is the work of our ego. If what it wants is not gratified, it succumbs to skepticism. You want to make a difference, achieve something, and be extraordinary, all of which are only games played by your ego in order to acquire a sense of fulfillment. We are disillusioned by mundane life, so we engage in spiritual practice. If the practice fails to bring about a sense of fulfillment, we think spiritual practice probably is no more real and reliable than worldly life itself. Had we devoted the same amount of time and energy to worldly concerns, we would probably not have ended up as bare-handed as we are now. So we constantly oscillate between secular concerns and spiritual quests, without a true transformation in the way we see and do things. Perseverance and resilience in practice are much harder than you might think. Only when we feel good about ourselves do we believe that we are on the right track. Otherwise, we might hesitate or even give up. Unfortunately, most people actually feel awful when they start practicing, and this feeling of awfulness will last for quite some time. Prior to practice, we are mentally scattered, unaware of our restlessness and rigidity. With mind training, we suddenly realize, for the first time in our lives, how chaotic our minds are. That is embarrassing and even unpalatable to many. Regardless, this is a necessary step on the path. Without accepting our wandering mental state, there can be no concentration. Initially, our mind is noisy and haphazard, like a waterfall cascading down a mountain. After a period of practice, it becomes slow and gentle, like a river flowing through a plain. Then it becomes like an ocean, appearing smooth from afar, but undulating when observed close up. And finally, it becomes like a high mountain, still, steely, utterly immovable. So do not perceive spiritual practice as mystical, or look for something extraordinary. This is the first message that an authentic teacher will want us to understand. Not until we have gone through various ordeals do we come to understand that a humble mind is the way itself. The teacher advises us to recite mantras, prostrate, or practice the preliminaries of the Great Perfection because he wants us to gradually let go of all kinds of haughty expectations and extravagant fancies and to experience the real taste of Buddhist practice. As the first paragraph of the Diamond Cutter Sutra says, the Buddha, together with his disciples, meditated in the woods outside the city of Shravasti. When mealtime came, the Buddha put on his robe and entered the city with his alms bowl to beg for food. After he returned, he ate his meal, put aside the bowl, took off his robe, cleaned his feet, rearranged his seat, and sat on it to meditate again. Simple was the life of the Buddha, who attained supreme enlightenment and was worthy of offerings from both humans and gods. After completing several million mantra recitations and thousands of prostrations, your mind will become much quieter, even though you may still be unable to visualize vividly the detailed images of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, or mandalas. You will learn to let go of hyperbolic ambitions and romantic notions of quick attainments. Practice becomes a progressive path, solid and specific, done every single day, just like eating and sleeping. The Buddha says that all sentient beings have Buddha nature, which neither arises nor ceases, neither increases nor decreases. Phrases like Buddha nature, the true nature of the mind, or the innate mind, all point to the same thing. The thing that is immovable and inseparable from you, always, at all times. It is neither expected to arise at a future time, nor will it be given to you by your teacher. What the teacher does is simply help you to cast away all the unnecessary garbage in your backpack until the real gem shows through. When Milarepa was with Marpa, he longed for a method to turn himself into a Buddha in a single lifetime. He earnestly believed that there must be a way to become a Buddha in one day or one night through meditation, just as alchemy turns a stone into gold. He figured that the Lama would grant his wish at once, but he could not have been more wrong about this. Although he did whatever Marpa ordered him to do, the Lama, often reprimanding him or beating him, never seemed to be pleased and never taught him anything. When one day Milarepa sat and wept for the first time, utterly shattered, Marpa came to see him. "My teachings are not just idle boasting," he comforted Milarepa. "Since you obviously have extraordinary perseverance, when you put my instructions into practice, we will see if you can attain Buddhahood in a single lifetime." He told Milarepa that he would teach him a pith instruction if the latter could build a house for him. So day in and day out, Milarepa carried earth and stones on his back to build a house, while all the other students gathered to receive initiations from the Lama. Each time the house was nearly finished, Marpa would beat Milarepa furiously and make him demolish whatever he had built to build a new one. An open sore appeared on Milarepa's back. Yet he was nowhere near even the faintest shadow of the Dharma he desired. Day after day, pain and toil softened away his pride and eased his need for quick results. He no longer thought that his negative karma was easy to purify, nor did he yearn to become a Buddha in his lifetime. At one point, he even intended to give up the spiritual path and was prepared to commit suicide. It was at that moment that all obstacles between him and his Lama were cleared. Agreeing to teach him at last, Marpa explained to him, "In order to purify your negative karma, I ordered you to build 4 houses. Each of them represented one of the 4 enlightened activities of pacifying, enriching, magnetizing, and subjugating. I had you thrown out of the Dharma gathering and did many other seemingly unreasonable things to you. But you have never lost faith in me. This implies that your future disciples and lineage holders will possess the necessary qualities of faith, diligence, wisdom, and compassion. They will generate genuine renunciation in this life and be perseverant and assiduous on the path. They will finally attain enlightenment and with both compassion and the power of blessings become perfect teachers. The teachings of the Buddha can be passed down by words, but their uncontrived meaning only exists in the minds of teachers. Its transmission only has one passage, from mind to mind. When you have dropped all your prejudice, camouflage, and wishful thinking, no longer clinging, anxious, and desirous, your mind becomes truly open. Not until then will you be able to grasp the message that your teacher has been trying to tell you. Opening the mind is no easy task. It requires us to weaken the mental distinction between others and ourselves, which is the very foundation of our sense of being up to now. Our entire life seems to be consumed by this conceptual differentiation. This or that, good or ill, accepting or rejecting. We always associate things with concepts, and concepts with emotions and attitudes. If we are not good at differentiation, we will be perceived as intellectually inferior. As society highly prizes a discriminating mind, the distance between people gets even wider, and the world becomes ever fragmented. We see isolation through our isolated views, while the bonds between people, things, and the world recede into the distance. Consequently, we believe selfishness to be the path to success. Some people do not know how to verify their spiritual progress. If so, just ask yourself, is there still a wide mental gap between you and others, and between you and the world? Our teacher helps us tame our discriminating mind and foster its openness. Sometimes they use fierce means, like Tilopa did with Naropa. It seemed that Tilopa always abused Naropa, whereas Naropa accepted whatever his teacher did to him without a smidgen of complaint. On the one hand, Tilopa repeatedly tested the limit of Naropa's mental resilience in a way hardly acceptable to others. On the other hand, Naropa, an extraordinary disciple, repeatedly proved to his master that his mind was wide open. Such an understanding between the two inspires wonder. Naropa deserved to be Tilopa's successor. The exchange between his mind and his master's was absolute. We may regard ourselves as already being open. But if our teacher instructs us to do something, our first reaction is still to judge, and even from time to time to hesitate or to refuse out of disapproval. It is not because we distrust the teacher, but because we are habituated to be judgmental and prone to resist if things are not to our liking. This is exactly the root of our quandary. If we are unable to be completely open and tolerant to the teacher, how could we be open and tolerant to others? It is for this reason that the teacher guides us to learn to be open and tolerant through them, to never transgress their injunctions. Emphasizing obedience is not meant to establish the teacher's authority. Rather, it is a way of cultivating our ability to accept all things calmly. Therefore, masters of the past often advised their students to act like a ferry boat that never gets tired of being called on, or an anvil ever retaining its shape while being hammered hot and cold. The world in which we live is a web of connections, where everything is interrelated. If we can open our hearts entirely to one person, we can open it to the entire world. And if we can communicate with one person under any circumstances, we can communicate with the entire universe. We will be appreciative and respectful to everyone around us, just as we have admired and revered our teacher for years. This mental directness, openness, and humility are thanks to our teacher's efforts. By them do we realize that we can achieve what Shantideva said. We can approach every being with loving kindness and compassion, and imagine that, through these kind beings, we will one day attain complete enlightenment. Step by step, our teacher helps us to adjust our attitudes and transform our minds. With progress in practice, our affection and devotion to the teacher grows. The teacher is a Buddha, yet they are not one of those idols in temples who sit high with golden faces. While we have the same reverence and devotion for our teacher as for the Buddha, we have the same affection and concern for the teacher as for a fellow human being. Buddhas and bodhisattvas come to this world manifesting birth, sickness, aging, and death, as well as joy and grief as ordinary humans do. All of these have deep meanings. I visited Chengdu shortly after His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche's passing. Some lay practitioners came to see me and asked whether they should feel happy or sad at the news of His Holiness's passing, given that His Holiness had gone to the Pure Land. It was true that His Holiness was a Buddha, and samsara and nirvana were no different to him. But to us, samsara and nirvana were two starkly distinct worlds like heaven and earth. To guide us towards liberation, His Holiness advocated rebirth in the Pure Land throughout his entire teaching life. He also manifested signs of his rebirth in the Pure Land. In his mind there was no suffering and pain. But in our minds, His Holiness's suffering from illness and his passing away were so real. We could not bear to see his suffering, nor could we bear our own pain and grief in losing him. How could we not grieve? Lama Ursul was Mipan Rinpoche's attendant and had followed Mipan Rinpoche for decades. As Mipan Rinpoche was in poor health, Lama Ursul often stopped visitors at the door in order not to disturb his Lama. Once in a while, Rinpoche would secretly meet his guests when Lama Ursul was not around. While keeping an eye on the front door, Mipan Rinpoche would say to the guests, "We'd better hurry and not let Lama Ursul see us. Otherwise he would be unhappy with us." It seemed that Lama Ursul, being a disciple as well as an attendant, was stern to his Lama. However, his care and love for his master was too genuine and strong to pay much attention to how he was supposed to behave. And Mipan Rinpoche knew that. Before his passing, Rinpoche went to the small cabin where his loyal disciple lived to bid farewell. He also wanted to make sure Lama Ursul had clarified all issues regarding the practice. "I am an emanation of Manjushri. My coming to this world is driven by my aspiration instead of being propelled by karmic force," Rinpoche said to him. "I have never revealed my true identity, since people in the degenerate age are so distrustful and calculating. Now that I am leaving soon, I want you to know about it so that you will not be overly sad about my departure. Our parting will be temporary. You too will go to Shambhala to meet me again there, where we will no longer be separated. As you have a close connection with me by being my disciple and attendant in this lifetime, you have shared all my merit. Everything you have done at my side, even just walking, is the cause of your future attainment of Buddhahood. It is thanks to the merit we accumulated in past lifetimes that we have the fortune to meet our teachers in this lifetime. Nonetheless, such a meeting is short. According to a popular Chinese saying, parents may have passed away before their children can repay their debts of gratitude to them. Unlike parents, teachers do not expect us to repay their kindness. But as students, we should do our best to honor them by following their teachings and practicing unflaggingly. To our teachers, may we not leave too much regret. One night, I dreamed that I revisited my life 33 years ago, when I first arrived at the Larang Buddhist Institute. That day, His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche arranged a wooden shack for me to stay in. In the dream, I also saw my then young neighbor who looked exactly the same. While we walked together chatting, I suddenly saw on the ground an ornament that was usually placed on the top of a mandala. While still in the same dream, I turned into an observer of the scene. Watching the past like a show, I thought with an overpowering sense of sorrow. When this ornament was new, His Holiness was still alive, and we were all very young. At that time, my life today seemed like the distant future. But now His Holiness has gone. How could all of this have happened in the blink of an eye? Thinking along those lines, I was struck by a sharp pain that pulled me out of the dream. Awakening in the dark night, tears rolled down my face. If only I could again be in the presence of my Lama, even if I had to give away everything I had. Although I would still be nervous and tense when seeing him, my joy would be inexpressible. Our teachers are here not because they yearn to stay, but because they are too compassionate to leave. They want to help, to let us know that our minds are already as luminous as theirs. When we slowly open up, we will learn to treat people and things with love and respect, and to live in harmony with ourselves, with others, and with the world around us. On each step of our journey to this openness, it is our teachers who have been with us all the time. When our hearts become gentler and our minds broader, we will truly appreciate that everything we see and encounter, even just a cool breeze, is the manifestation of our teachers' kindness and compassion. Our time with our teachers is fleeting. So is our human life. May we always remember the kindness of our teachers and the meaning of their teachings.